So we're going to try to pick up, I'll kind of recap a little bit just in the last chapter. If you want to know, if you wanted to catch up with what all the lectures, all the classes are on my YouTube page for the book of Acts, okay, all the way up to this far. We're really toward the end. We just have a couple. In fact, I'm just finishing it because a couple people asked me to finish off Acts, and so we're going to do it. Otherwise, I'd move on already, but we're going to finish it up since we started it. So where we left off, we went all through the book of Acts, the beginning, just a reminder of Acts. It's the life of the Holy Spirit within the new church established by God, okay? It's written by the Apostle Luke, the evangelist Luke. It's pretty much his book 2. He wrote his Gospel Luke, and then Acts is his second. It's basically his second book, and it's just a transition right into the early church. We talked about how the church was developing in the years after Christ's death and resurrection. We talked how the Gentiles are drafted into the church, and then Paul's conversion, and then a lot of Acts is now Paul doing his missionary work to the various churches that he has established. And then now he is coming back to Jerusalem. He has collected money to bring to the church in Jerusalem. He's coming to make an offering at the temple. And while he's there in Jerusalem, there's quite a ruckus with him at the temple. So there's this, he has somebody with him that is, the Jews at this time were seen as defiling of the temple because he wasn't a Jew. He was of Greek descent, but it's ambiguous. Paul didn't do this on purpose. It just happened to be someone with him. And then there's a dissension. They arrest Paul. The Sanhedrin is trying him. And then the local magistrate of Jerusalem is there to kind of to be the judge of this. And Paul is pretty wise in saying, he starts a dissension between the Sadducees and the Pharisees about doctrine. And now this is a chaos. And so the magistrate says, I'm going to send you to Festus in Caesarea, where the head legate of the Roman Rome is there to look over Judea. So this is where he left. He's being transferred to Caesarea, okay, after this big ruckus in Jerusalem. So this is where chapter 24, where we're going to pick up, is going to come. Okay, and it doesn't matter which Bible you're using. We said this in the past. Some translations are going to be a little different. Some translations might be a little better than others. But for the most part, we can get through this. So if anyone would like to help me out and start reading verses 1 through 9 for me, volunteers would be great. Okay, I'll go. So after 5 days, the chief priest Ananias came down with certain elders, with a certain attorney, Tertullus, and they made known to the governor charges against Paul. And after he had been called, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, Since through you we have attained much peace, since your foresight reforms are coming to this nation, we welcome this in every way and everywhere, most excellent Felix, in all thanksgiving. But that I may not hinder you any further, I urge you to hear us briefly in your forbearance. For we have found this man a pestilence and one who stirs up riot among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the factions of the Nazarenes, and even tried to profane the temple, whom also we seized. And by investigating him yourself about all these things, you will be able to find out the things which we ourselves accuse him. And the Jews all joined in charge, claiming all these things were thus. So this lawyer, the Tertullus, he's being very lawyerly. He's among the Felix, who is the head of he's a Roman legate, going to be judging these matters. He's flattering him. You're the greatest. You've done great things. Yeah. And all the Jews are like, yep. And then he says, we brought these. We want to. You can see for yourself these charges that we have against you, that we've accused him. You can see for yourself. So he's starting his litigation against Paul here in Caesarea. Caesarea is to the north. It's on the Mediterranean Sea, so it's a little bit of a ways from Jerusalem. Okay, so it's up towards what now would be nowadays Lebanon, going up that way, where kind of like where, if you know where Israel is now, is Haifa, up that area. Okay, so it's up northern Israel, a modern Israel time. If you would think of a modern Israel map, up north by Haifa. Okay. So this was it took 5 days to get from Jerusalem to there, and this happened 5 days later, okay? So, all right, so moving on to the next verses here. By the way, they call him this ringleader of a faction called the Nazarenes. So this was this was kind of a term of disrepute. It was kind of derogatory. He's calling, he's one of them Nazarenes, right? But we would take that. Many Christians, we see that as this is a good thing. Like we were one of the Nazarenes. Christ was known as a Nazarene, but there actually became a sect called the Nazarenes that were Christians, but they weren't part of the church. Okay, so this term Nazarene is kind of ambiguous. Okay, but they were using it here in a negative sense. Okay. All right, verse 10. And when the governor gestured to him to speak, Paul answered, knowing that for many years you have been a judge to this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. Since you are able to find out that it was no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship, and neither in the temple, nor in the synagogue, nor in the city did they find me discussing with anyone or putting pressure on a crowd, nor are they able to prove to you about that which you now accuse me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way, so Paul's making his defense. He's saying, I've only been in Jerusalem 12 days. They're accusing me of going and seditiously trying to get a riot going. And I said, I've been here long enough to talk to anybody to make a riot, okay? To make this big protest at all, okay? He says, but this I will confess, that according to the way, do you guys remember this from the very beginning of this book of Acts? We went over, was used from this term, the way. What was the way? Remember, it's capitalized here in my book. I don't know about yours, but it should be.
Yeah, and that was the Christian doctrine from the beginning, right? That they called it.
If you were a Christian, you were following the way, meaning the way. This is how there was the way to Christ. It was the way to live. Okay, so our Christian faith was just known as the way in the beginning. Okay, so according to the way which they call a faction, meaning the Jews at this point called themselves. They didn't deny that these were Jews. Okay, they were a faction of the Jews. And we talked about this early on in Acts, that there was many different Jews, right? There was the Pharisees, there was the Sadducees, there was oh goodness gracious, the monks living up in where the Red Dead Sea Scrolls. My mind just went blank. The Essenes, yes, we talked about the Essenes. There are the Samaritans, which were considered Jews, but they followed a portion of the Jewish faith. The first 5 books, they didn't follow the prophets, but the Torah. So there's many factions, right? And there's many schools. Paul, as we'll hear, he's a student of Gamaliel. There's very many schools and ways of thinking of Jewish. It wasn't this mono religion, okay? There's different thoughts amongst the Jews at this time. So this was just another one of them, okay? I thus worship the God of our fathers, believing everything that is in accord with the law that is written in the prophets, having hope in God, which these men anticipate themselves also. There is about to be a resurrection of both the righteous and the irrighteous. So what does he say? He says that he follows everything that is in accord with the law and that is written by the prophets. He doesn't deny any of it. He's not denying his Jewish faith. He's actually saying, my Jewish faith is fulfilled in the Messiah. We've always looked for this. So verse 16, for this reason, I myself also do my best to maintain always an unoffending conscience before God and before men. Now, after many years, I arrived to the almsgiving to my nation and to make offerings. So he's come back to give offerings after all his missionary work. In which task they found me in the temple, having been purified, not with the crowd nor an uproar, but certain Jews from Asia. So he said purified. So he came, he made shorn, he had his hair cut, he cleansed himself. He made a vow of the Nazirite law. So the Nazirites were, you took a vow to live almost like a life of a monk, a Nazirite was, okay? And you made this vow. Sometimes it was just a short term, sometimes it could have been for your whole life. But the Nazirite law, you would make this vow. You cut your hair, and then you say, I pledge not to cut my hair. You cleanse yourself in the temple. You purify yourself, and you remain continent. Okay? So this was what he did.
Is this the same thing as tonsure?
We get this from that. It comes from that, It comes from that. In fact, the long beards in our Orthodox faith by the priests, some people claim that the tradition comes from the Nazirite law, where we're not going to, once we make this tonsuring, we're not cutting, we've sanctified ourselves, okay? That's just, that's not dogmatic, but it says that a lot of that's where the influence comes from, okay? Because many of us sign these things, we won't trim our beards, we won't cut our beards, we won't cut our hair, okay? All right. So, but certain Jews from Asia. So he's saying that there's these Jews from Asia Minor, present day Turkey. That if we remember the missionary works of Paul, he has no friend. He has very little friends there. He's made no friends there amongst the Jewish population because he's preaching Christ, and Christ crucified, and he's been arrested numerous times, beaten, kicked out of cities. People will go to another city to look for him, and Paul's just been through it. So these are the people that recognize Paul in the temple, okay? So it was these Jews from Asia who ought to have been present before you to make accusations if they should have anything against me. Or these men themselves, let them tell what unrighteous deed they found when I stood before the council. Unless it is about this one utterance which I cried out while standing among them about the resurrection of the dead, I myself am being judged today before you. So you remember he said that the dead, remember when he saw this, they're all coming after him. The Sadducees, the Pharisees, they were in the temple coming after Paul, making accusations and claiming blasphemy. And then he kind of wisely said, wait a minute, is this about doctrine? Because you two don't, remember, you guys don't even agree about I proclaim the resurrection of the dead just like you Pharisees do. And then that set off the Sadducees who don't believe in this. And so they were starting to fight with each other. So he's saying, well, if you guys want to lay claim it, you can get mad about that, but not anything else, But then you have to follow, work it out yourselves because Paul's very clever, okay? So he's doing all this to Felix. He's presenting himself to Felix. He's claiming that he did nothing wrong in the temple, and it's just and he didn't foment any rebellion in the temple. Okay, he's really setting up that. In fact, he broke no laws, and he's making this plea to the Roman representative. So Rome doesn't care about theology. They don't care about the Jewish customs here in this sense. That's not what's going to make him guilty before the Roman representative, right? So Paul's like, it's just basically a theological debate. They're not happy with it, okay? And they have to prove that it's something else besides this. That's the essence of what's going on here and what Paul's trying to do here, okay? All right. But so let's talk about here. He continues, verse 22. But Felix, knowing more exactly about the way, so this Felix, he's been around. This is not his first assignment, okay? So he's been through these places where he's encountered Christians already, okay? So he knows a little bit about their communities. And so this is what this is. But Felix, knowing more exactly about the way, continued saying, when Lysias, the commander, comes down, I will decide your case. So he's not fully in charge. Lysias is. And so he's going to come and he's going to just pass the buck to him, okay? And he directed the centurion for him to be kept and yet to have some relief and not prevent him from attending him. But after some days, Felix arrived with Drusilla, his own wife, who was a Jewess, so she was a Jew. He was married to a Jew. And he sent for Paul, and he heard him speak about the faith in Jesus Christ. And as he was discussing righteousness, self-control, and the coming judgment, Felix became afraid and said, go away from me, away for now, and when I find an appointed time, I will call for you. At the same time also, he was hoping that money would be given to him by Paul, therefore he could use to send for him and often converse with him. But when the 2 years were fulfilled, Felix received a successor, Porcius Festus, and wanting to offer the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul bound. Okay, so Paul he says, I'm going to pass the buck, wait. And so he arrests Paul. So Paul is kind of like on house arrest, but he's, so because he could see people. So people can come and visit with Paul. In fact, Felix visits with his wife, and he's preaching the gospel, and Felix is not known to be such a righteous person. So the thought of having judgment it's too uncomfortable for Felix. Like he sends them away. I can't hear this anymore. Okay? For spiritual note, this happens a lot, even for us. Like when we hear the gospels and they impact us, we kind of turn our ears off to it oftentimes. Like we just plug it up. It's too uncomfortable to like really look ourselves in the face and say, oh, I'm going to be judged for all this. And so we just kind of let it go. So this is what happened here with Felix. But Felix he's a corrupt official, and he's really keeping Paul locked up more than any reason is because he's wanting for the Christians to come and pay a price for Paul. He's wanting people to pay to see him, hey, I want an audience with Paul, let me pay. He wants to make money off of Paul, okay? So for 2 years. Now, revisiting these scriptures today, I was like, I didn't even pick it up that, this is 2 years he's in prison. It's like, it's just kind of like, okay, 2 years later, 2 years he's in prison like this, just for no charge, for nothing, right? Really, for nothing that he did wrong. And so he's just sitting there. And he's writing letters, so a couple of the letters written to his communities are written this time, okay? And who is, again, remind you, who has transcribed all this? It is Luke. And so how can he know? Was Luke there? I think he might have been, but how can he know all that's going on? So especially during the trials, just like trials that go on, and they have stenographers, and this stuff is public. The same thing. Transcripts were available. Okay, so Paul is getting these transcripts, and so he knows what's going on during these trials. Okay, what happened? It may not be exact. It may be a summary, but he's laying it out for us based on direct evidence. Okay. So Paul's still very much leading the Christian community while he's in jail. Okay, so 2 years later, now Felix is replaced with a successor, as he was recalled to Rome to answer charges of mismanagement and was finally removed from his office. This is what happens to him, okay? The Jews of Palestine, remember the lawyer came and was flattering him at the beginning, but they really hated him. They really disliked him, okay? So Felix wanted to offer them a favor in order to get a good, so they're going to leave Paul there. He's not going to release Paul, even though, because he was in Felix's control at this part. So he leaves Paul here, okay? Luke mentions these details to show that Paul's long imprisonment was not the result of his real wrongdoing, but just it's an administrative it's just corruption at this point, okay? politics. So we remember there's a lot of politics in Jerusalem, especially among the Sadducees who controlled. We talked about this during our early studies. They controlled the properties in Jerusalem. That's why they were there. The Sadducees was the high priest. They were elected to the high priest because they controlled everything there. Okay, financially speaking. The Pharisees were the really righteous ones. They were above that, but they were very vocal and loud and powerful and often hypocritical. Okay, but that's what's going on in Jerusalem. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on. Any questions? This is chapter 24. These few chapters here, there's some nice details, but it's not like, we're not going to get like a lot of theology here, a lot of script, like spiritual, but it's important. I love the book of Acts because it is historical, okay? And when you study history, you're studying the church. The church is history, okay? So any questions, thoughts, comments before we move on to the next chapter? All right, so we're in chapter 25. I just 25.
The Act of Apostles, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did Luke know Paul at this time?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Luke traveled with him at times. Yeah. Yep. He knew him from his travels up into to Greece. He was a physician, so he knows Paul well.
Okay.
Yep. Festus, therefore, this is the new representative. Festus, therefore, having set foot in the province, after 3 days went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews made known the charges against Paul, and they were urging him. It's been 2 years. They haven't given up a grudge here. Asking a favor against Paul, that he might send him to Jerusalem, lying in wait to destroy him along the way. Festus therefore answered that Paul was to be kept in Caesarea, and that he himself was about to go there quickly. Therefore he says, let the powerful among you come down with me. If there is anything improper about this man, let him accuse him. So what did the Jews ask Festus here?
They want a new jurisdiction.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. They'd send him there first because they can't do anything in Jerusalem. Yeah.
I want to rub it in on Paul.
So they want Paul to travel to Jerusalem so that they can attack him and lie in wait. They say they want to lie in wait. They want to take his life. Okay, so they're looking for a pretense for Paul to be traveling away from, so that they can take him. They're trying to now test. Hey, do us a favor, let him come down to Jerusalem. This traveling. Yeah.
At what point did that command of Osiris, where did he not?
It doesn't ever say. Yeah, it didn't come.
Yeah.
So it never. So
It went from Festus to Felix,
Yeah.
right?
From Felix to Festus.
Felix to Festus.
Yeah. And Lysias never. Nope.
There was no.
Nope.
None
They just-
was ever sent out.
They just kept him up in the tower.
No, it's so hypocritical of them, right?
Yeah.
Because they're holding him, Paul, they want, allegedly they want him because he broke their rules, yet here they are setting him up to break the rules.
Yeah. So let's see. So, but Festus says, you got to come up to me in Caesarea, and you can bring your men with me who want to, and we're going to retry him again, right? Paul's been how many trials now? Okay. So, but Festus saw through this very quickly, so he's pretty wise. Okay. If there's anything that the Romans hated is like having stuff happen on their watch, because it gets back to Rome, and it always looks bad on them. Okay. So they try to put these things down fast. And after, verse 6, after he had spent among them not more than 8 or 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and on the next day he sat upon the judgment seat and ordered Paul to be brought. And after he had arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood about him, bringing many weighty charges against him, which they were not able to prove. While Paul defended himself, saying, I have sinned neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar. But Festus, wanting to offer the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, "Do you want to go to Jerusalem and there be judged by me about these charges?" But Paul said, "I am standing before Caesar's judgment seat, where it is necessary for me to be judged. I have wronged no one, as you yourself also recognize well. If therefore I do wrong, I have practiced anything worthy of death. I do not refuse to die, but if there is nothing in those things of which these men accuse me, no one is able to grant me to them. I appeal to Caesar." Then, when Festus had spoken with his council, he answered, "You have appealed to Caesar you shall go." Okay. So Festus says, "Okay, you can go back to Jerusalem and we'll do this again." And Paul's like, "I've been down this road. I'm getting nowhere. I can't have a fair trial." And he says, I came to you. You were the Roman authority initially. Now remember, who is Paul? What makes him really unique among the apostles?
He's one of them, right? He's Jewish?
He's a Roman citizen.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. He was born in Tarsus in Asia Minor. He was born. His father was a Roman citizen. Probably earned it, bought it, fought in, or usually when you go into the Roman army or you've bought your way in, you become citizen. He's born a citizen of Rome, and so therefore he has a little bit more legal rights. Okay. So now one of those legal rights is that he can appeal to Caesar. Now, does this happen a lot? Do people get to see Caesar? Probably not. Probably people go and wait for Caesar their whole life and Caesar's not going to see anyone, but he has the right to do it. And so this was it. He says, if I did anything, then I'll risk being sentenced to death before Caesar. And let's go to Rome. And so this is what he calls. I guess after 2 years, he's done with it. Okay. So, but remember here that Paul is in this. So I want you to know that Paul, they can never prove Paul guilty of anything, right? He says not against the Jewish law. He didn't sin against the temple. Some people were scandalized, but it wasn't Paul's doing. And he's not sinned in any way against the Roman law, so against Caesar. Okay, this is why he's so bold in doing this. Okay, he's got a clear conscience. Nothing to lose, but an innocent man, right? He's got a clear conscience. He feels like I'm innocent. I'll take it to, as they say in our country, I'll take it to the Supreme Court. This is the supreme authority. Caesar's the supreme authority.
Well, he believes in the justice because this is the problem.
Yeah.
Justice is not right in any place.
No, well, I don't know if he's. In the end, I don't think he's seeking justice. I think he's seeking to convert Caesar. His mission is to convert the Roman Empire, to convert the Gentiles.
He just wants to go to
Yeah. Okay.
Smart man.
He's just like he's preaching to all these authorities here, and like Felix, who becomes uncomfortable with it. Right? He's there to preach. Okay. All right. So now, as he's still there in Caesarea, Paul is going to meet with Agrippa. Okay. So King Agrippa is the Jewish king at this time that is just a vassal, really, of the Roman Empire, but he is Herod the Great's grandson. Okay, so remember the Herod the Great under King Agrippa. This is when the temple, the second temple, is finally finished. It was finally finished. That Jesus would have been there. So it wasn't even fully completed. Rebuilding during Jesus' time. So it is just finished now, just shortly after Christ's death. Okay. So verse 13. Now when some days had passed, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and greeted Festus. Bernice is his wife. Okay. This is an incestuous relationship, by the way, too. Okay. And while they were spending many days there, Festus laid before them the things with respect to Paul before the king, saying, "A certain man was left a prisoner by Felix, about whom when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews made known charges against, or asking for a sentence against him. I answered them that it is not a custom of the Romans to grant any man before the accused meets his accusers face to face and has a place to defend himself against the accusation. Therefore, after they had assembled here, I made no delay, but on the next day sat upon the judgment seat and ordered the man to be brought. And when the accusers stood up, they were bringing no charge against him of such evils as I myself was suspecting. So here we had Festus saying, even admitting, no accusing. I see nothing wrong. No accusations worthy of him being here. So, but he's already been in jail for 2 years. So, but they had against him some debates about their own religion and about a certain dead man, Jesus, whom Paul claimed to be alive. And being perplexed about the investigation of these things, I asked whether he would like to go to Jerusalem and there be judged about these. But when Paul appealed to be kept in custody for the emperor's decision, I ordered him to be kept in custody until I send him to Caesar. And Agrippa said to Festus, I would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, he says, you will hear him. So Felix is talking to King Agrippa. Because King Agrippa knows the ways of the Jews a little bit better. He's, culturally Jew. He's not very pious believer, but he knows, of course, culturally the thinking of the way the Jews think and their religion. Okay, he's respected because he's helped now finish the temple. Okay. So he's gonna have him. They're gonna speak with each other. So therefore on the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pageantry and had entered in the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city, and when Festus ordered Paul was brought. And Festus says, King Agrippa and all there present with us, you observe this man about whom all the multitude of the Jews appealed to me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. But I myself found him to have practiced nothing worthy of death, and since he himself appealed to the emperor, I judged to send him to him. Yet I do not have anything certain about him to write to my Lord. Therefore I have brought him forward before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the investigation has occurred, I may have something to write. So he doesn't know what to write to Caesar about what's going on with this guy, with Paul. So he wants their help. For it seems to me irrational in sending a prisoner not to signify also the charges against him. So he doesn't want to just bring what he sees as some frivolous inter-Jewish squabble before Caesar. He wants to know what charges I can really lay against this guy. Okay. So Agrippa and Bernice, so they're entering, they're giving them the whole royal treatment here. Okay. And they're going to be brought before Paul to have a conversation, okay? And Agrippa said to Paul, in this chapter 26 now, you are allowed to speak about yourself. Then Paul stretched out his hand and defended himself. About all the things of which I am accused by the Jews, I consider myself blessed, King Agrippa. And I'm about to defend myself before you today, especially because you are knowledgeable in all the customs and debates among the Jews. Therefore, I beseech you to hear me patiently. So what's going to come now is Paul's defense of himself. And as Paul has done before the Jews and before the magistrate, over and over again, he's going to tell his conversion story. Okay? He's using this as an opportunity. His defense is Christ. His defense is going to be to spread the gospel. Okay? So this is his defense. Verse 4. Therefore all Jews know my manner of life, from my youth up, from which the beginning was spent among my nation and in Jerusalem. So his nation, he was in Asia Minor, Caesarea, but he grew up in Jerusalem. Okay? He was educated in Jerusalem from a very young age. Since they have previously known about me for a long time, if they are willing to witness that I lived as a Pharisee according to the strictest faction of our religion. So he's saying they all knew me. They all know who I am. They cannot deny it. And I was one of the most zealous people within the faction of the Pharisees. Remember, he persecuted the church. Very zealous. And now for the hope of the promise made by God to our fathers, I am being judged, to which our 12 tribes hope to attain as they worship in the earnestness night and day, about which hope I am being accused of by Jews, O king. Why is it judged unbelievable among you all if God raises the dead? So he's going to go back to the raising of the dead, because this is a dissension between a few of the factions of the Jews, right? And this is what he believes happened to Jesus, and they're mad at him about it. Therefore, I myself thought it was necessary to practice many things against the name of Jesus the Nazarene, which also I did in Jerusalem. Not only did I myself lock up many of the saints in prisons, having received authority from the chief priest, but also when they were being destroyed, I cast a vote against them. And I am hearkening back, just because I know we are missing it because we've got so many. What did he mean about casting a vote against them during persecutions? You remember where Paul first enters the scene in the Acts? Very early on, what is the first thing we learn about Paul? Where is he first found in the book, in the Bible in general, in the book of Acts? At the Stephen stoning, at the Saint Stephen, the deacon Stephen, who he's there as he's being stoned, holding all the garments of all the Pharisees who are stoning him. So he was there. And as I punished them, often throughout all the synagogues, I was trying to compel them to blaspheme, and raving against them, I was pursuing them even into the outside cities. In this pursuit, I was going to Damascus with the authority and permission of the chief priests. At midday along the way, I saw, O king, a light from heaven, beyond the brightness of the sun, shining around me and those going with me. And when we had fallen down to the earth, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. And I myself said, Who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I myself am Jesus, whom you yourself are persecuting. But rise, stand on your feet, for to this purpose I have appeared to you, to pre-appoint you an attendant and a witness, both of the things you have seen and also the things in which I will appear to you, taking you out from my people and from the Gentiles to whom I myself am sending you, to open their eyes, to turn them from darkness to light, and from the authority of Satan to God, and they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those whom have been sanctified by faith in me. So he recounts his conversion as he's going to Damascus, right? He's told this story so many times, even within the book of Acts. I think he's done it 4 or 5 times now, okay? So afterwards, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but both to those in Damascus first, and also in Jerusalem, and also the region of Judea, and to the Gentiles. I was declaring that they should repent and turn to God, practicing works worthy of repentance. Because of these things, Jews seized me in the temple and tried to lay violent hands on me. Therefore, having attained help from God, I stand to this day witnessing both to little and great, saying nothing but what both the prophets and Moses said was about to happen, that Christ was to suffer, that his resurrection from the dead, he should be the first to proclaim light both to the people and to the Gentiles. Okay. So what did he say here? This is an important part of his gospel. Okay. He says, saying nothing but what both the prophets and Moses said was to happen. Okay. Paul is a Jew. He still sees himself as a Jew. He's a believer in the Messiah and fully Jewish. He says, this is what the prophets say. This is what Moses proclaimed. Okay? He's appealing to King Agrippa. I am Jewish, and I am proclaiming you the faith that you guys proclaimed, that I was taught. Okay? And you just have to open your eyes. Okay?
But he was not a Jew.
Paul?
He was?
Yes.
He was not a Roman?
He was a Roman citizen. He's Jew.
He didn't believe in this.
No.
I thought that he was.
No. There's
living
Jews that
there
lived
on
all
the
throughout the
Romans-
empire.
Roman.
All throughout the Roman Empire.
Orthodox.
There's Jews. The Jews were tolerated by the Romans. Okay?
Okay.
They had a special relationship with Rome. They were a thorn in the side of Rome, but they were tolerated. And the Christians were tolerated too, because they were a sect of Judaism as they saw it, until they weren't anymore. And then they became persecuted. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. This is the important thing about Paul. He always, if you listen to all his epistles, he's saying, I'm a Jew of Jews. I'm more Jew than the Jew. He'll tell you this, okay? But he was picked to be a missionary to the Gentiles by God, okay? He's got a special relationship to Christ.
And he called himself the first among Jews. Is that the term he used to describe himself?
Yeah, I think he even called first among apostles. No, only because he suffered the most. Yeah, you know, he wanted to make a point to his audience that I suffer this because I'm the worst. You know, I've done this because I was the worst of sinners, because I persecuted the church. I deserved the suffering. You know? So that therefore it makes him the strongest, most vocal person of conversion into the gospel. Okay, yeah, and he accepted all of it. Paul accepted all of it. Yeah, without murmuring.
Would he have known about the martyr of the other apostles during his time?
So during this time, the apostles, there's a couple of them. Say James. I think James, the brother of the Lord, has been martyred already. So he's known some of them, but a lot of the apostles they're dispersed. Like, where's Peter? Peter's in Rome right now. The apostle Peter, during all this time going on. So they're gone. They're doing their missionary work too. Okay. The Church of Jerusalem was left to community in Jerusalem. James was the head of it, the brother of the Lord. His head was severed. He was martyred there. So they had a community. That's where Paul was coming back, bringing alms to the saints in Jerusalem, as he said, as he was going. He was collecting alms for the saints in Jerusalem.
It's kind of an aside. I'm just curious if this states to Paul's personality, because he's like, I'm the first of the apostles.
Yeah.
His buddies are getting martyred at the same time, maybe before he died.
He's the king of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So he presents here the resurrection of Christ. Okay. Ultimately, this is where they depart from what a lot of the Jews. So Christ was Messiah. Christ died. He asked for our repentance, and his resurrection from the dead ends our death. This is what the Jews always believed. Okay. This was who the Messiah was supposed to be. He understands it in the book of Isaiah. This is the suffering servant. Okay, this is our Messiah. Okay, so he's bringing this all to King Agrippa. Verse 24. And while he was saying these things in his defense, Festus says in a great voice, "Paul, you are raving. Your many studies are turning you into raving madness." And Paul says, "I'm not raving, most excellent Festus, but I declare the words of truth and restraint. For the king knows about these matters. And I speak to him boldly, since I am persuaded that none of these things escape him, for this has not been practiced in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know that you believe." So he's kind of boxing in King Agrippa, right? He should know about these things. These are the prophets, right? Do you not believe the prophets, King Agrippa? Don't you? Right?
He's answering before he gets a chance to.
You don't want to say, "No, I don't believe the prophets," right? No, he's not going to say that, right? Yeah. And Agrippa said to Paul, "In a little you are persuading me to act a Christian." Is he mocking? Is he joking? But he's pressuring him. He says, "Yeah, you're making a case, right?" And Paul said, "I could pray to God that whether in a little or a long time, not only you, but also all who hear me today might become such I myself am, except for these bonds." He's preaching. He didn't really care about his defense. He's telling them, but he's preaching. He's converting them. And the king arose, and the governor, and Bernice, and those sitting with them. And when they had withdrawn, they were speaking to one another, saying, "This man is practicing nothing worthy of death or bonds." And Agrippa said to Festus, "This man could have dismissed if he had not appealed to Caesar." So Agrippa, washing his hands clean, he said, he shouldn't be killed. He shouldn't be put to death. But he's already appealed to Caesar, so, the die is cast. That's his lot. He's already said it. Can't take it back. No take backsies. So he just wiped his hands clean. He's not gonna, tell him anything that he did anything wrong. Let him go to Caesar. Okay. All right. So Festus thinks he's going mad with these teachings, as any good Roman probably would. Who hasn't heard any of the ways of the Jews or the gospel for the first time. He just don't get it. Man risen from the dead, right? But Agrippa, he says, "You get this, right, Agrippa?" And Agrippa probably did get what he was saying, but he's a politician, okay, at this point. He's not going to upset Rome, okay? He doesn't want to upset the people that he rules over that are want to seek Paul's death, okay? Not going to happen, right? But Paul wants to convert everyone, okay? So, there is 2 chapters left of the book of Acts. And I don't want to rush through it unless you guys want to stay late. I usually do this for an hour. We've got 10 minutes left. Would you like to pursue the next 2 chapters and we start something new next time, or can we put it off for another day?
I can stay.
We can stay.
You can stay?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any questions up to this point on what we covered? Okay. Again, this is this is not so much like spiritual reading as much as like a good drama.
I can
All right?
tell.
Yeah, it's a good drama of what's going on with Paul here. Okay, so it makes you want to read more. Like, how's the story end? My wife said we can't leave cliffhangers. And we'll be right back. Yeah. All right. So, the chapter 27. So now Paul is going to Rome. Okay, he's going to Caesar. So he's gonna have to leave from the Holy Land and head up that way by boat. So verse 1. And when it was judged that we sail for Italy, they were delivering up Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion, Julius by name, of the Augustan cohort. And embarking on Andromaean ship, which was about to sail to places along the coast of Asia, we put out to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. And on another day, we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul with benevolence and allowed him to go to his friends and obtain care. So this Julius, he's the centurion charged to look after Paul. And Paul's going to these cities that he's been to, right? Because he has churches there. He's been missionaries. And the centurion's very benevolent to him. Says, go and see your friend, come back. So he's been very kind to Paul. And from there we put out to sea and sailed under the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. And when we had sailed through the open sea among the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came down to Myra and Lycia. And there the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy, and he put us aboard that. And when we had sailed slowly for considerable days and with difficulty, had arrived off of Cnidus. Some of these, I'm not sure how to pronounce completely. Cnidus. Since the wind did not go farther, we sailed under the lee of Crete, across from Salome. And with difficulty sailing past it, we came to a certain place called Good Harbors, near which was the city of Lasea. When a considerable time had passed and the voyage was already unsafe, since even the fast had already gone by, Paul was advising them. So even the fast had gone by. So there's a long time here. They had a period of not eating, right? So And they said to the men, I observe that the voyage is about to be attended with the hardship and much loss, not only of the load and the ship, but also of our lives. But the centurion was more persuaded by the pilot and by the ship owner than by the things spoken by Paul. And because the harbor was unsuitable for wintering, the majority had a decision to be put out to sea from there, if somehow they might be able to reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing southwest and northwest, and winter there. And when a south wind blew gently, thinking they had attained their purpose, they raised anchor and were sailing past Crete, close to the shore. Right. So do you guys know where these islands are? These Greek islands? Crete?
No,
Yeah, Cyprus is the big island. That's not too far.
Was from Crete.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a longer, thinner island. He's trying to get on the other side to, have a better harbor there. Okay. Verse 14. But after not much time, a typhoonic wind rushed down against it, the one called the northeaster. And when the ship was caught and was able to face the wind, we gave way and let ourselves be carried along. And running under the lee of the inlet called Claudia, they were with difficulty able to get the lifeboat under control. And after they had taken it up, they used supporting cables in upper girding to the ship. And being afraid they might run around all the shallows of the citrus and let down the equipment that they were carried along. There's a lot of details here. It surprised you how much details they document for us. The next day, as they were being violently storm-tossed, they began to throw out the cargo loads. And on the third day, they threw away the ship's equipment with their own hands. And since neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no little stormy weather was pressing upon them, finally a hope of being saved was being taken away. Okay, so they're in really bad place with bad weather. But when the 14th night had come, as were being carried about in the Adriatic Gulf, toward the middle of the night, the sailors were supposing that they were approaching some land. And they took soundings and found it to be about 20 fathoms. And having sailed a little further, they took soundings and found it had be 15 fathoms. And being afraid that we might run aground against the rough places, they threw out 4 anchors with sterns and were praying for it to become day. And as the sailors were seeking to flee from the ship, had let down the lifeboat into the sea under pretense of being about to lay out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion, to the soldiers, unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the lifeboat and let it fall away. And until the day was about to come, Paul was encouraging everyone to receive food, saying, today is the 14th day that you have been continually expecting help and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore I encourage you to receive food, and for this is for your salvation. For not a hair from your head of the head of any of you shall perish. And having said these things, and having taken bread and gave thanks to God before them all, he broke it and he began to eat. Sound familiar? And everyone was cheered up, and they themselves also took food. And all the souls in the ship were about 226. And when they were satiated with food, they were lightening the ship by casting out wheat into the sea. So Paul is trying to take care of these people. He becomes kind of like a counselor, okay? And he's assisting them. And somehow they find him as somebody that is worthy of listening to. Okay. He prophesies that they all going to live, all 126.
So in some of these verses it says we put to sea, we sailed. So was Luke with them during this?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. I would suspect that there might be a royal we,
Okay.
as in all the people there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Okay.
I don't think Luke is there. If you know, as we'll get to here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when they came, they were recognizing the land, and they did not consider a certain bay with a beach, and they intended to drive the ship onto it if they were able, and casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea, while at the same time they were unfastening the ropes of the rudders and raising the foresail to the breeze, and they were steering for the beach. By striking a place where two seas met, they ran the vessel aground, and the prow struck and remained immovable. But the stern was being destroyed by the force of the waves. And the soldiers' intention was to kill the prisoners, lest any swimming out should flee away. But the centurion, intending to bring Paul safely through, prevented them from carrying out the intention, and ordered that those able to swim should throw themselves overboard first and get upon the land, and the rest should follow, some upon planks and others upon some things from the ship. And thus it happened that everyone was brought safely upon the land, just as Paul had prophesied, right? Is okay? Right. So they break ground. Do you know where they landed? They're pretty close to Italy now. So they were in the Adriatic Sea, and they're almost to the other side of around the Horn there, and they end up on the island of Malta. So,
They went pretty far. The storm was
yeah, they did. Yeah, 14 days at sea. Yeah. And when they had been brought safely through, they recognized that the island was called Malta. And the barbarians showed us not ordinary benevolence, for because the rain had set in and because of the cold, they kindled a fire and received us all. But when Paul had gathered together a certain multitude of sticks and laid them upon the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. And when the barbarians saw the beast hanging from his hand, they were saying to one another, "Doubtless this man is a murderer, whom though he had been brought safely to the sea, justice is not allowed to live." However, he shook off the beast into the fire, and suffered no harm. But they were expecting that he was about to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But after they had expected such a long time, had observed nothing unusual happening to him, they changed their minds and were saying that he was a god. So he went from a murderer to being a god. So. So there you have 76 people on the shore by a fire, warming them up. Okay. Now the lands around the place were the lands belonging to the first man of the island, Publius by name, who welcomed us and lodged us hospitably for 3 days. And it happened that the father of Publius was lying down, distressed with fever and dysentery, and Paul went in. And after he had prayed, he laid his hands on him and cured him. And after this had happened, the rest of the people on the island also who had ailments were coming to Paul and being healed. And they also honored us with many honors. And when they were putting out to sea, they supplied us with things of our need. So Paul, a prisoner, he's seems to be immune to the poison of a viper, and he's healing all these people by the grace of God. Okay, all these, as they say, barbarians. Okay, and they won favor before them. At the end of the months, we put out to sea at the Alexandrian ship, and he went on the island in which was marked for Dioscuri. And after we put in at Syracuse, we remained there for 3 days. And from there we went around and arrived in Rhegium. And after 1 day, a south wind sprang up, and the second day we came to Puteoli. And there we found brothers and were called by them to remain on them for 7 days, and thus we came to Rome. And the brothers, having heard these things about us, came from there as far as Appius, the market, the 3 taverns, to be meeting with us. And Paul saw them and gave them thanks to God and took courage. And when we entered into Rome, Paul was allowed to remain by himself with the soldier who was guarding him. So before Paul heads into Rome, he lands, and all the people knew about him. All the Christians and past acquaintances have come visited him before he enters into Rome with the centurion. And it happened after 3 days, he called together those who were the leading men of the Jews. And when they had come together, he was saying to them, "Brothers, though I myself have done nothing against our people or the customs of our father, I was delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of Romans." So there's a big Jewish community in Rome. So he's going to tell his case to them first. "And when they had examined me, they were intending to dismiss because there were no grounds for death in me. But when the Jews contradicted, I was compelled to appeal to Caesar. Not that I had anything to accuse my nation of. For this reason, therefore, I called you to see and to speak with you, and I am wearing this chain for the sake of the hope of Israel." And they said to him, "We ourselves have neither welcome letters about you from Judea, nor have any of the brothers arrived and declared or spoken anything evil about you. But we request from you to hear what you think. For about this faction, it is known to us, and everywhere it is contradicted." So who's the faction? Christianity. They want to know more about it. "And having appointed a day for him, many came to him at his guest room, and he was explaining to them, testifying about the kingdom of God, and trying to persuade them about Jesus from both the law of Moses and from the prophets, from morning until evening. And some were persuaded by the things he said, but others were unbelieving." So he's counseling one by one everybody to teach them. Some believe. This is what happens. This is all his missionaries. Some believe, some don't. Okay. "And when they did not agree with one another, they were dismissed after Paul had spoken one word. Well, did the Holy Spirit break through Isaiah the prophet to your fathers, saying, 'Go to the people and say, hearing you will hear, but never have insight, and seeing you will see, and will never perceive. For the heart of his people had been made dull, and their ears they are heavy of hearing, and their eyes are closed. Lest they should see their eyes and hear their ears, they have insight with the heart and turn back, and I should cure them. Let it be known, therefore, that this salvation of God has been sent to the Gentiles, that they themselves will hear." So Paul is he's quoting Isaiah, which Christ quotes often when he receives hardness of heart from doing his miracles. He quotes it often. "Those who have ears to hear, but you're going to hear and not understand. You're going to see and not perceive." Okay, he's quoting it, and now he lays probably the hardest truth on them, since you don't believe this is going to be given to the Gentiles. Okay. Verse 29. I don't know. Do you have verse 29 in your book there? Mm-hmm. What is it? See, it's omitted in some manuscripts, but it's about the Jews. Should be them, debating among themselves. Someone read it for me. Verse 29.
And when he had said these words, the Jews departed and had a great dispute among themselves. Then Paul dwelt 2 whole years in his own rented house and received all who came to him, preaching the kingdom of God and teaching the things which concern the Lord Jesus Christ with all confidence, and no one forbidding him.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So just a little postscript on this book of Acts. So it's believed that Paul was released after his first Roman imprisonment, and he himself expected, as the fathers and the early church historians record, he is later imprisoned a second time, and this time he is martyred. So this first time he's there for 2 years, he's released, and then he gets arrested again. And he's, by tradition, St. Paul and Peter are condemned to death, and they die on the same day. That's why we celebrate their names day together in the church, St. Peter and Paul's Day. So Paul is beheaded, and Peter's crucified upside down. Okay, the reason for that is because Paul's a Roman citizen, and you can't crucify a Roman citizen. It's meant for the Gentiles and for the worst of the worst, right? A political state. But Paul's beheaded. It seems it's more humane, and because he's a citizen of Rome. Okay. There's no doubt in between. Paul's writing letters while he's in prison. There's a good bit of his letters that are written while he's in prison, and Luke is there transcribing for him and writing these things. So, well, you asked if it was Luke with. I don't think he was on the ship there, but Luke was with him in his ministries and taking down a lot of what you see, what you hear here. Remember that again. This Acts is written by Luke, and it's his second portion of his gospel. So it's like gospel 1 and 2. So, and Luke was not with Christ, right? He's a later apostle. So again, everything that we hear in the gospel of Luke is going to be how he received the faith from who?
From Paul.
From Paul.
From Paul.
Okay, so why Paul's not an evangelist in the sense that he wrote that. He got Paul. Luke is recounting this, just like Mark is a student of Peter. So when we get Mark's account of the gospel, it's he, you know, Mark wasn't there with Christ. He got it from Peter. Okay, so I didn't give a lot of commentary. I don't think it was needed. It's just recapping what happened to Paul here. Okay. He's imprisoned 2 times in Rome. He's there preaching, converting, and he's put to death in Rome. Okay. So, any questions? This is it for. It said that, you know, you don't get the whole story. How does Luke? How does he die? How does he? You know. But this is how the axe is left. Okay. Go ahead.
Is it known, he never had a chance to appeal to Caesar, did he?
No, I don't think so. I don't think. Yeah, no one's gonna. People could wait. Again, they make this. I don't think anyone gets appeals to Caesar.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a right they
It's
have.
just the
They can just wait their whole life. Yeah, yeah,
And that's why it mattered 2 years in Rome.
yeah, yeah. Right. So, but there's a big, you know, Paul writes his letter to the Romans there. That's probably should be what's next in the book, which is he's writing to the Jewish community there in Rome, which probably a good. I think maybe we might go over that. It's a very deep book, a very theological book. Some people consider that like a synopsis of Paul's theological thinking and training, or you know, on Christianity. But so maybe we'll delve into that a little bit. But there's some big topics in that I might have to research on how to explain a little bit better than just from the top of my mind. Okay. All right. I appreciate you all being here. Let's pray and